Hey, thanks for popping into the new place. As always, I would have loved to put out my next video much earlier than this, but my beginner level of Blender has forced me into mistakes upon mistakes. Having said that, I am happy to be in my new room, with my new body. And my computer is ecstatic to hear that it is not going to be rendering 24 hours a day. But all that pales in comparison to my happiness and utter joy that you have decided to give me a view. Probably overboard. But thanks! Check out all the mistakes in my new intro. Tucker Carlson is what one might call a bit of a train wreck, but there is no use putting labels on him. He is more than capable of doing that himself.
Men in America seem very different from what they used to be. Whether it's a Chinese flu virus or George Floyd or some forgettable border dispute in eastern Ukraine. How many people do you want living in your country? They can't all be Nancy Pelosi's housekeepers. They can't all bus tables at the French Laundry in Napa. In spite of the Democratic Party's best efforts to import a permanent serf class to serve its donors, no one invited them here. We didn't want them to come. Arresting people for walking through the U.S. Capitol building? How is that a crime? But at its peak, Athens only had about 8,000 voters. So past a certain scale, democracy can't function very well. That's why our ancestors came to America in the first place, because there was room here. Ask anyone who's been around the world and knows what the options are. Ask, if you left the United States, where would you move? And no one's going to tell you Lagos or Mexico City or even Singapore. Yellowstone is beautiful because it's empty. The core problem is that bigness is inherently ugly. Massive size is a threat, no matter what it is, always. In our bones, we understand this. Anything huge is inherently terrifying to us. Children run from big things. Pregnant flight suits, ladies and gentlemen. Your relationships are the sum of your life. Those relationships start with your family. They move outward in concentric circles. They include your friends, your neighbors, and the people you work beside. This is your actual community. The human beings you know personally, the ones you love, the ones you take responsibility for. And that can never be a very big group.
Wow. I would say thanks for that, Tucker, but, well, I'm not actually so thankful. It's not such a surprise that some call you terrible names, Tucker. I, however, won't do that. I will look at only what you're saying, staying away from any hypothetical implications, which may or may not be accurate. That was some of the bad, but you are in fact correct about a few other things.
One of the weirdest features of modern life has got to be how we've all been trained to ignore the things that really matter. Why hundreds of thousands of your fellow Americans seem to be living in squalor on the sidewalk, and turn instead to CNN's latest fixation. These are the issues they tell us we must care about. But they're wrong. These are not the most important issues. It's like an entire population transfixed by issues that ultimately don't really matter. Automation is replacing many of the low-skilled jobs that still remain. Some will fight their way to the top of our society with the usual combination of inborn talent and grit. But we will be sincerely glad when they succeed. Even if every single person who snuck across our southern border this year goes on to win the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, it would still be worth worrying about the effects that mass immigration have on our total population numbers. First and most obviously, big governments don't treat their citizens very well. Past a certain size, organizations of any kind lose their regard for people. What you're looking at is not a community, but 47 million individuals, each with opinions and interests and preference and goals that aren't quite the same as anybody else's. In other words, they're human beings. Crowding is bad for people. They could figure that out. People aren't that stupid. They've just been misled. It's worth remembering that other people, in the end, are all that matters.
However, it's not your arguments that I will look at, Tucker. Surprising, hearing that coming from me. The problem is that you're arguing for a silly conclusion. Don't feel too bad. Your opponents aren't doing much better. If I may oversimplify and generalize for a moment, this seems to be a very common issue between the right and the left. Straw man as this will surely be for a great many. The right often seem to place a great importance on the country, keeping the customs, laws, basically the culture as static as possible. Yep, conservatism. But also, as we see here, nationalism. The left, at least on the issue of immigration, seem to place a great importance on helping immigrants, helping our fellow humans and giving people a better life. For the time being, I would simply point out that it seems to me like most people want to preserve their culture and way of life. This seems to be a very normal idea many people in every country hold as important. I would also point out that helping others is a very noble and worthy act that also seems to me to be an idea which many people in every country hold. But perhaps, as with just about everything that the mainstream media puts out, this is a very poor framing of the issue. Perhaps we're looking at this incorrectly. Let's take an example. Imagine a volleyball tournament. Let's say a volleyball tournament. Each team is made up of players. Those players want their teams to win. They've developed plays and strategies. They've practiced for many hours together. Tucker, it pains me to say, is correct in our example. A player changing teams is not going to be good for the old nor new team. The old team loses some of its strength and potentially the secrecy of their strategies. The new team has a player who is not a perfect fit into their existing strategies. Training this player will take time, but is certainly doable. As I said, however, Tucker is arguing for the wrong conclusion. He, like a great many, want their particular team to win. While this sounds reasonable, I do not share this view. I don't want my team to win, or at least that's not my primary goal. I want volleyball to win. In case I lost you there, the countries are the teams. Humanity is volleyball. So, I hear you saying that my mask has probably been tied too tightly. You're most likely right. But here's the problem. We, meaning different people in different countries, don't have the same strategies. Each of our different countries has different cultures, different focuses, beliefs, laws, ethics, etc. Just like each volleyball team having their own plays, practice, rules, etc. This is what Tucker is focusing on. He seems to be arguing for keeping his team, or country, consistent. He is making an argument that bringing in new players will hurt his team. Of course, all analogies fall apart, and this is where mine dies. Some immigrants into America are, let's say, potentially much better volleyball players than some of the, let's go with current volleyball players America has. Define better any way you like. But this is childish, selfish, and very old thinking. My tribe good, you different, you tribe bad. We can look any length into history to see how that story goes, or just open a newspaper. I don't look at countries that way. I zoom out a lot more than that. What if we were to focus on everyone on the earth, not merely the people in this or that country? How do we fix global problems? How do we advance as a species? How do we end war? Hell, how are we going to do anything useful at all? We need to work together. How many countries work together to get the International Space Station into orbit? How many people from different places, cultures, and indeed times worked on what Einstein eventually turned into a very simple equation? Shut yourself off from others if you like, but that is not a recipe forwards. The left that you so despise isn't much better, though. They seem to think that everyone around the world is just like them in their little white picket neighborhoods. Sorry, not the case. The world is full of people very different from you in many areas. We don't work together, do we? How many wars are going on right now? Around the world, about 40. How many children die of hunger a day? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000. How many slaves exist in the world today? There's an estimated 40.3 million people living in slavery right now. I won't depress you further by continuing with these examples. So the question is, how can we work together? How can we stop these problems? Tucker, you hapless oaf, you actually touched the answer. The reason we have trouble working together, the reason we have war, the reason we can't solve these global issues is simply, as Tucker points out, we believe different things. And that is where I've stepped in, and indeed why. There's a large problem with irrational thinking. Let's say, for the sake of argument, I believe in fairies. Say I believe that fairies visit me at night and give me information about my life and the world. It's perfectly fine for me to believe this. Personally, some of my favorite people are into odd stuff. Now, let's say someone suggests that black holes are actually folds in space that we may be able to travel through using some new scientific method. Well, you should know that the fairies have told me on numerous occasions that this is impossible. Of course, it's absolutely fine for me to agree or disagree with this idea. But here's the rub. I'm not allowed to use fairies in my argument. At least, not until I can convince you that fairies are real. How the hell am I going to convince you that fairies are real? I cannot give you my personal experience with fairies. I cannot show you any reasonable evidence that they are real. I can only use poor arguments and bad methods and claim it is evidence. You should not be swayed by such things, yet many people are. Many people all around the world are convinced into believing outrageous things, which causes some of them to commit atrocities, and causes others to simply silently go along with those atrocities. Personally, I don't put much importance on countries, nor tribes, nor gangs. I'm more interested in the human species, probably due to some bias or another. If there were a push towards rationality, skepticism, and critical thinking, I could keep my ideas about fairies if I really wanted to, but I would know very clearly that using them in arguments would cause a great number of raised eyebrows, at least until we have rational reasons to believe in fairies. If I were then forced into honest dialogue using logic and evidence, we might be able to solve the black hole issue, as well as a great many other problems. We would certainly reduce those differences between peoples of different countries and cultures, after which time, hopefully Tucker's nationalism wouldn't be so bothered by people entering his personal castle. I hate to admit it, but I don't see a way for us to all effectively work together so long as we argue from our different personal or cultural, etc. beliefs. Those different beliefs pop up in our disagreements all the time. Really, there are only a couple of choices here. Number one, let's continue the way we always have. Different groups doing different things, their own ways in different parts of the globe, each thinking they are correct and best, and investigating their own desires while criticizing those of each other group, just like Tucker is doing here from his castle. Or we could collectively come to some agreement about what to do, whatever that agreement is. The only way I can see that we could possibly come to any agreement is by using methods of coming to knowledge that we all agree to. But we already have a method like this. People already use this method in most parts of their lives. Evidence and reason. We don't wear seatbelts because Shiva has commanded us to. We wear them because we want to be safe, or perhaps we don't want to pay a fine. We wash our dishes because not doing so will make us sick or attract insects, not because Thor told us we should. But when it comes to some other areas, many use much poorer, obviously faulty methods. Personal experience, fallacies, and subjective opinion are not going to help us. Actually, those beliefs and methods are exactly what is preventing us from coming together and ending a lot of the horrible crap that happens around the world every day. But it's not my goal to change what you believe. It is my goal to make you ask yourself, honestly, if other people should believe it as well. In other words, is it a rational position to hold? Look, I don't even care what the answer is. Hold as many irrational beliefs as you like. Just know that they are irrational. Water, horse, horse, water. Do what you will.